months or so?
It was a difficult task, to be honest. I had a chance to look at everyone's yesterday before the release and kind of like, I sent some findings to the group where I think that we might differ from common consensus at least, and where I differ, and I'm far more aggressive in a couple spots, and it was great to see, a bunch of folks like all of us really put time and effort into evaluating two different formats and really players who are different stages of their career. Like, how are you supposed to evaluate Malachi Nelson, who will not start this year for USC, versus a player like Aaron Rodgers? Like, that's an incredibly tough task to think about in terms of valuing rookie picks and someone who is so far away from, you know, really starting on your NFL roster. And so it was fun, but it was also incredibly challenging.
I mean, Austin, it is an absurd task to say, how do we rank Nick Singleton amongst Jonte Cook and Drew Aller with Lamar Jackson, Aaron Jones, and Aaron Rodgers? How did you feel about this process?
Um, I think it would have been a lot more difficult. And Felix, you like we have a spreadsheet that basically feeds into everything in the back end, and everyone kind of has their own rankings. And then there's like a sheet that does consolidate, so you can see who has what players ranked, and it'll tell you like if you don't have them on your sheet. And it was nice to have those guardrails where you could kind of go through and say, I don't have, I don't know, Jalen Hyde. I forgot Jalen Hyde in my rankings. It sounds like, Felix, you didn't check that at all. So I mean, that probably makes it a lot more difficult that you're not like the pool of names. You're just kind of going off the top of your head.
It was more difficult. It absolutely was more difficult. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to get called out at some point today where there are just players. I'm just going through the rankings and trying to figure out where I have these players, how I value these players, how they would be valued if you had them in C2Cs. And yeah, I did not look at everyone's rankings until about 10 minutes before this show started. So it'll be interesting to be called out. Matthew, I think we have you back now. Can you talk
Yeah.
to us?
Yes, I'm good now. Yes. Yeah.
Listen, folks, it's going to be a while before we get everything going right around here. By a while, I mean probably the next 3 years. So, give us a break there. Drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Matthew, I think there is some absurdity to rank Justice Haynes right next to Leonard Fournette and other NFL veterans. What were your initial impressions, and did you struggle with this task?
I did once, weirdly to say, when I started getting closer to like the 100 mark, and I feel like there's a lot of, we'll see some stuff here as we're going to discuss on the show, how many NFL players we have compared to college players. We have positional breakdowns on here as well. And it was very difficult once we started getting to that because I wasn't sure. And I'm going to be honest, I almost did the same thing as Felix for the most part. When I first did all of my rankings, I wasn't looking at anybody else because I didn't want to be swayed by, oh, well, Austin has Caleb Williams this high up in his rankings. Should I have had him higher? Chris Moxley's got 80 tight ends ranked. Should I rank 5? Like, it was a whole thing trying to figure out where to put them. And definitely once we started getting to about the 100 mark, I was like, man, I really don't know what to do. How much more should I value these college players compared to like these kind of okay producers on the NFL side? Do you want, like, I'm going to use, for instance, a guy that I think you have in yours, Felix, that I don't have, like a DJ Chark, who has had like 2 good seasons in the NFL, but like since then hasn't done much. Do I want him, or do I want to put a up-and-coming college guy that I think could be really good on the NFL level? And that's kind of ended up becoming the hardest part for me as I moved down the ranks.
I feel like I'm going to feel self-conscious after we have this conversation, and I get
You're going to catch a lot of strays directly or otherwise.
that I don't have ranked too high. Mox, you have a breakdown of position of NFL versus college players. Can you just go through that breakdown so folks can understand what the C200 looks like once they get access to it?
Sure, yeah. So we have 154 NFL players ranked out of the 200, 46 NCAA players ranked, and I think that's a pretty good breakdown. I personally have 50, and we're all within a very similar range of that within one certain standard deviation when we look at this statistically, and I think that's probably fair considering what we know about uncertainty in NFL players. When we look at the positional breakdown, I think it's actually kind of more interesting. So, right, we have 46 quarterbacks currently ranked, 55 running backs, 84 wide receivers. And this is assuming, I think in a lot of leagues you're starting through wide receivers. So we want to be valuing them more, and 15 tight ends. And I know that I am the outlier here because I rank 20 tight ends in my top 200. And I will not be shy about that, of course. But I think that's a really good breakdown as well for the positional groupings based on, how most leagues are currently working. And 46 quarterbacks feels light when you think about it, right? Because you want to put more in, and then as time goes on, it's really hard to get more quarterbacks into your top 200 looking at other positions and saying, okay, I feel way better about a player like Clemson's wide receiver Antonio Williams versus a Devin Brown quarterback at Ohio State. Like, projecting those players becomes incredibly difficult, which is why it's probably a little bit shallow, but it's an accurate representation. I thought another interesting breakdown that we talked about was by year when we look at the NCAA players, right? So when we look at 2024, we have 19 players in this breakdown. Okay, we feel a little bit more certain about this class. 2025, we have 13 players. In 2026, we have 14 players. I think that speaks to the depth of the incoming freshman class, the certainty around 2024, and maybe the uncertainty around 2025. I think 2025 is probably a weaker class, all things considered, based on what we currently know. And I think our rankings reflect the optimism, uncertainty, and I think I really feel like we did a good job ranking 2024 players. Those were the easiest to rank because we know the most about them. We have the most information about them. But in general, I think I think it's a really interesting way to look at our rankings. And I think it informs a lot of discussions when we talk about how we value rookie draft picks for dynasty leagues, as well as how to value debut players. So it's pretty cool.
Philosophically speaking, Chris, I just wanted to hop in here real quick. I think I've used the word mystery box on about 11 straight shows that I've been on here at C2C, and I've taken the last 4 or 5 weeks off for other things. But I think the fact that we have 2026, one more player essentially more than the 2025 class, I think some of that uncertainty is actually valuable in some instances. Like it is. We have some information on some players in 2025. Maybe we don't like that information. Whereas the lack of information can be enticing for some of these guys because there's some insulated value. Maybe there's just like the nature of like, this guy could probably be a wide receiver too. We haven't seen this guy yet. The athletic gifts are so good that he probably has more upside than this guy we've already seen like not do it once. So I think that might be playing in a little bit here too. And it's something that I think we'll be talking about a lot this offseason.
Yeah. And I mean, y'all know, or I have talked about many times on this network, basically across like so many different shows, about how I value a freshman highly. Like I think I have 16 freshmen ranked, so 2026 players. And I don't think uncertainty is necessarily, I think uncertainty is probably the right word, but that doesn't mean that we don't have a wealth of information, right? We know how good this 2026 class is across different position groups, especially quarterback, based on all the data that we have from a high school level. And so we can make reasonable expectations while at the same time, speaking to what you just said, value insulation matters a lot in these types of formats. You don't want to have a player that loses value immediately, and freshmen rarely do because they're not really given a chance to shine. So you have that period where you can probably move them if you want to. So I'm aggressive ranking them, and I think 14 true freshmen in our rankings is a lot for 200 players.
It is a lot, Austin, and that you mentioned mystery box. I think people, if they're going to look at this for the first time, they're going to say, how can you have Drew Aller, who ranks around the 50s in our rankings, how can you have someone like him ranked ahead of Trey Lance? Drew Aller hasn't started a game. How can you have Dante Moore ranked ahead of Najee Harris? Dante Moore hasn't played a snap of college football. What would be your answer to that?
I think for some of those guys, it depends if you want to talk micro or you want to talk macro. Maybe for a specific player, like I think I don't know if I'm the lowest on Trey Lance or not, but to like directly talk about that one, like a rushing quarterback that is coming off a horrific leg injury, like I'm not going to rank that guy highly. I think people that are buying him this offseason, like this isn't the time to do it. It's next offseason. That's totally beside the point. I think for a lot of these guys, like Najee Harris, I don't know how many, he has maybe 3 or 4 like productive years left in the NFL. For some of these freshmen, like if we think Dante Moore gets on the field this year or first thing next year, we're getting guaranteed 2 or 3 years where they're going to play, and then they probably have some NFL value too. So like that's the thing that I think some people fail to factor in, because it is difficult. Is like you might have 2, 3, 4 years of this guy getting college points at the minimum. Okay, maybe he doesn't work out in the NFL, but in some cases, I think the younger guy is actually more valuable, just because like you have probably the locked in college production over the next couple of years, where a guy like Najee, a guy like Trey Lance, if he loses this job, like they might not have some of that value even 2, 3, 4 years down the line.
Yeah, I mean, I could use an example, Felix, from year one of our company. A guy who's on this graphic right here, Marvin Harrison Jr., who both of us had ranked extremely high. Year one, you're telling me now you wouldn't have traded him for, say, whoever the Najee Harris was of that 2 years ago? You would have. It's I think, as Austin said, it's the macro versus, well, no, I was going to say the same thing there. I was going to say the macro versus the micro. That's the same thing. No, but it's
macro,
oh,
micro.
Okay, never mind. Thanks,
Zoom
Austin.
out, zoom in.
Zoom in. Okay, cool. I was thinking of something completely different. Anyways, thanks. Anyways, yeah. So I think it depends on how you really look at that. Like for me personally, I just mentioned DJ Chark. I feel like I'd rather take a shot on one of these college guys that we have ranked in that area over him, because I think he's got a lot to go now to be a productive NFL wide receiver. As good as he was, I think the injuries kind of screwed him. Najee Harris, another one. Like, what does he have? As Austin mentioned, maybe 2 years of production. If he was, I don't honestly know where Najee is ranked currently, but I mean, if you could get a Justice Haynes for him, would you not take that chance? I mean, I probably would. You're getting a possible couple years of college production and then likely decent draft capital on the NFL side. So it is very much I think it's very much what does your team look like, or what do your teams look like in what player you really want at the end of the day?
I have a question for the group here real quick, and I want to direct it to Chris first, because I think he is more likely to have thought about this before. In regular Dynasty, we talk about 2 or 3 year windows. You're not looking 5 or 6 years down the line. You're kind of worried about the next couple. The nature of it being a C2C league, obviously you want to compete year in, year out, but does that almost make you want to consider a slightly longer window? Maybe it's 4 to 5 year window that you're thinking of instead of 2 to 3, especially when you're comparing these cross league rankings and trades, because there is potentially a lot longer window. That there will be some value on the college side. They'll probably, if they get draft capital, they probably have some value insulation over their first couple years in the NFL. I mean, there's a lot of different factors here that I think you start expanding that window a little bit, and then you can start getting when you think of it that way, I think you can get a little more, I don't know, weird with your rankings.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because that's kind of something I did with my rankings. I have Caleb Williams 7th overall. He came in at 13 for us. I ranked him 7th. I think Felix did as well. He jumped Trevor Lawrence. He jumped Lamar Jackson. He jumped CeeDee Lamb, because you're going to get a quarterback 1 season out of him if he stays healthy, which you could make that caveat for every single player in this entire list. But he is being drafted as a quarterback 1 basically in every college format, including CFF. So you're baking that into his production, and so you're getting that on one side. And I feel the same way about where I'm ranking Marvin Harrison Jr., which is fairly high as well. He's our overall 23rd player, and there are a handful of players that I'm doing the same thing for. And I think when you think about it, so the freshmen play into this incredibly well as well, which is like, okay, I think Dante Moore probably has 2 years of being a quarterback in Chip Kelly's offense at UCLA, which is probably a top, based on how I feel about him, and I think a lot of us feel about him, that's a top 12 quarterback in college fantasy. And so you're getting 2 years of top 12 quarterback in college fantasy, which is incredibly valuable, and then a player who we think can adapt to the NFL and be like, I don't know that he's going to be like dynamic electric, but I think he could be like a Joe Burrow-esque type player in terms of like how he produces on the field. So those are things that I'm thinking about. So I'm way more aggressive ranking younger players that I think have college fantasy upside, and then ranking even juniors who have college fantasy upside that I think like major college fantasy upside. I won't get too aggressive, but I do think there's an argument to be made there. Yeah.
We're talking C2C's cornerstone rankings, the C200, now available at campus2canton.com. Austin, the question that you posed was, should we be considering a 5-year window or a 6-year window? I think that this list represents how much faith we have in the NFL players and in that pipeline. Because when I look, just for example, looking at the running back position, Nick Singleton is in the top 8 or so, and he is ranked ahead of players like Kenneth Walker, DeAndre Swift, Josh Jacobs, Nick Chubb, Javonte Williams, Ramondre Stevenson. And I have no issue with that based on how much faith I have in Nick Singleton's ability to dominate at the college level, and then will be a day 1 or day 2 NFL draft pick based on the value of the running back position. I mean, we saw Jonathan Taylor go in the second round, so maybe Nick Singleton's a second-round draft pick, but I have like no problem at all with saying that Nick Singleton is one of the most valuable players playing football at the running back position, regardless of it being college or NFL. Okay.
No, I think that's fair.
Sounds like you agree. Joe or Colin asks, in the chat, assuming this will eventually be exportable by and filterable by Ranker. The list is the list, folks. So this is going to be the one list where you cannot sort by Ranker. Now we have the ability to go.
We don't want to commit to that necessarily. We had a lot of people asking in the Discord today too. So we're debating. For now, no. We want it to be a kind of a consensus list amongst us. I'm very curious who people don't want in their rankings.
I do too.
And why is it Colin?
I'm very curious if there's like people that they specifically exclude or include.
It's probably me.
That's a conversation for the Discord. We can have that conversation in the Discord and let our subscribers call us out. Let's see. Where do we want to go here? Do we want to go to players with the most variability, the highest differentiation between players? All right, let's go there. Let's get into the muck here. Quinn Ewers for Matt, Austin, Colin, and Alfred, all in the 50s. For myself and Chris Moxley, rated 96 by Chris and 161 by me. Mox, let me let you start here. What's your beef with Quinn Ewers?
I don't have a beef with Quinn Ewers, to be honest. I actually feel like this is a pretty appropriate ranking. I think there were some serious questions about his game last year. He wasn't, the golden child that we were promised. He was someone who struggled. It was post-injury, yeah, but there's questions. I cannot get on board with ranking him in the 50s currently based on what we know about him, but he's still a top 100 player. I mean, that's a player that you're taking within the top 9 rounds of a dynasty startup, right? Like, that is not an indictment on the player who I think Quinn Ewers is.
I don't think that my ranking
maybe is a little bit different.
I don't think that that's an indictment either. I don't know that Quinn Ewers has shown anything to make me believe that he is locked in to be a first-round NFL draft pick. I think that there's the risk that we could be looking at a DJ Uiagalelei situation. Now, he's shown more talent than DJ Uiagalelei, but what I mean is that, I'm just a little bit worried. I think the things that are in Quinn Ewers' favor is the fact that he has Steve Sarkisian as his offensive play caller, the fact that they're really surrounding him with a lot of playmakers, whether it be Adonai Mitchell, Xavier Worthy. They bring in Jonte Cook, who's one of the best freshmen. You got Jatavian Sanders there, and they brought in the best running back, or a lot of people's best freshman running back in Cedric Baxter. I mean, that is a situation where it would be hard to fail if you are a good player. But this is a ranking of players that I have faith in, and based on last season, I don't necessarily have faith in him. But come on, guys. It's 200 players, and we're ranking college and NFL players. The fact that he's here in the 200 is not – it would be an indictment if I was not including him. I'm saying that this is an NFL player that you should value, but I have him at 161. So get off my back about it. I'd appreciate
I was surprised
it.
I was surprised you included him.
I actually am too. I was really surprised. I figured he was not going to make your 200. I don't think there is a wrong ranking of him. Personally, I think he deserves to be in the top 100 because some of this, especially with the college guys, as we get farther down, is a little bit more projection. Like, yeah, we've seen it from Drake May. We've seen it from Caleb Williams. There's not as much projection for them. But some of these other guys, you do have to project a little bit. And you have to assume, like you said, he does put it all together with a Steve Sarkisian in that offense. But we saw what he was able to do for a guy like Mac Jones in one season and got that guy. He was 15 or 16, I believe, to the Patriots. He was top 20. I know that. Like, if Quinn is able to put it together, I think it's fair to say he has more talent than a Mac Jones. So if he puts it together, he's going to jump up higher. Like, you won't have him there next year or whenever you update him. And so that's kind of why I ranked him in the top 50, because there's a lot of other quarterbacks, specifically on the NFL side. A Trey Lance, as Austin brought up earlier, like, I think I'd rather take the upside of what Quinn is over a guy like Trey Lance that probably is never going to, unfortunately, be able to do it due to injuries and just kind of not having the time to develop. So that's why I ranked him where, I still kept, guys like, I still have your boy Anthony Richardson, Drake May, Caleb. I ranked a lot of quarterbacks over him, but I felt like 50s was the right range to put him. I think there was 3 of us in that range, as you mentioned, and then obviously YouTube. But again, I really don't think there's a wrong. Leaving him out would have been the wrong ranking, and I don't think anybody did that. So
he's a Steve Sarkisian starting quarterback. That's enough, actually, at Texas to keep him in there. I think Arch Manning we probably have ranked ahead of. Do we have Arch Manning ranked ahead of Quinn Ewers? Generally speaking,
I do personally. I'm pretty sure we.
Yeah,
do.
I do too, because of the insulation of his value. And again, a lot of this is a value proposition. And I think you could probably get more for Arch Manning right now than you can get for Quinn Ewers, given, like Austin said, there is the mystery box factor. We haven't seen Arch Manning fall on his face, and we probably won't see that this year because he's likely to sit behind Quinn Ewers. So let's go.
Manning is right behind Quinn, just to answer your question.
Yep. Right behind.
Quinn is 70.
Oh, wow.
Manning is 75.
Yeah, so they're right.
I think I have Arch Manning ranked ahead of him, personally.
I do as well.
Let's go to Brock Bowers. Nobody higher than 75 except for Chris. You have him at 36. I have him at 160, the lowest at 162. I guess, Chris, we have to start with you. Why should we value a tight end this highly? We just saw Kyle Pitts come onto the season. He hasn't performed like a cornerstone player.
Yeah, so I'm what, 40?
You have him as a top 50 player, top 40 player,
50 spots higher than anybody else. Having a difference maker at the tight end position, when we talk about value over expected or value over average, whatever however you want to define it, is incredibly important to winning your league. And so, if I'm in a bunch of CFF drafts currently, Brock Bowers has not gone later than the 103 in those drafts. And yes, they're tight end premium, but it also underscores the point of having a tight end who can win you leagues because they're scoring 5 more points than their opponent is really, really important. I think Brock Bowers has the potential to do that. Yes, he's a little undersized. I understand that, but he's an incredible athlete. He's someone who takes end arounds and can rush for 75 yards if you want. I think Bowers is an incredible talent. So I put him in. I also ranked 20 tight ends because I think that there are a ton of tight ends with potential to be game-breaking players. Brock Bowers just happened to be the highest of the ones in college.
Nino, Robbie, Matt, Joe, I see you all in the chat. Let us know in the chat if you think Brock Bowers is too high at 36. That's insane. Matthew, go ahead.
Yeah. I think that's a little high. I'm only actually 39 spots behind you, Chris. So I have him at 75, and I thought about ranking. I debated, if I'm being honest, right around the 55 mark, 2 set. I was figuring out where to put him in there. I do think because of everything we've seen him do at Georgia. I know people still have questions about him being, a little bit undersized, but like we've seen him be so dynamic with Georgia and the SEC. Like I can't imagine an NFL team that drafts him probably top 15 is not going to use him likely the same way in the NFL. So he probably smashes in some way just because as you scroll to the top of these rankings, what does it say? Tight end premium formats. In tight end premium, outside of Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, and George Kittle some years, because Kittle does have the injury bug, it is a wasteland at tight end. And if Brock Bowers can come in there and even do 75% of what he's been doing in the SEC, he's likely going to be a top 5 tight end at the NFL side. So I did struggle with him. I still think 36 is really high, but I know the way you value tight ends, and that's, again, why I like that it's a consensus ranking because it takes in your value of the tight ends with everybody else's. So I don't necessarily have an issue with it overall. I just thought it was a little high, but I do think he should be ranked higher for us personally than the 80s.
Part of my issue with the tight end position with college tight ends is the fact that the impact tight ends in the NFL are never the guys that we think that they're going to be. Think about Travis Kelce, Rob Gronkowski, Darren Waller, George Kittle. None of these guys were taken in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft. Meanwhile, my Detroit Lions have taken 3 tight ends in the first round.
Were Gronk and Kelce not both taken in the first round?
They were both day 2 picks.
Gronk was? Although Gronk also suffered a back injury, and Kelsey did as well, or suffered an injury in college. So
Gronk was a 4th round pick.
Yeah, I don't
Gronk
think
a 4th round pick.
I don't.
There's no way he was outside.
Gronk went in the 2nd round, and then Hernandez went in the 3rd or the 4th.
None of them had the draft capital of Eric Ebron, Vernon Davis, T.J. Hawkinson, Noah Fant, O.J. Howard, David Njoku. I mean, the list goes on and on. These guys that were taken in the top 32. To me, it seems, and Chris Moss is making a face at this position. I think that you have to be in the right circumstance to be an impact tight end at the NFL level. In college, Brock Bowers is going to be fine. Will he get top 20 draft capital? Probably. But what I'm saying is that when we project him to the NFL, I don't know that we can guarantee that he comes in and one that he's, utilized that he's supposed to be in. Even if he is, could his ceiling be 650 yards and 7 touchdowns? Yes, it could be. And that's why I can't rank him at 35.
So Kelce was drafted in the 3rd round, Gronk in the 2nd. To Felix's point, neither one was drafted in the 1st.
Both had devastating injuries in college.
Let's move on here to Drake May. The highest ranker has him at 18, low of 51, 2 rankers in the 30s. I mean, Austin, that seems fair for a guy that we expect to be the 2nd quarterback taken in the 2024 NFL draft.
Yep, I think this is a case, and I didn't really speak on yours at all, but similar with him, where if you just think a guy has a chance to be that at the NFL, you just go get a quarterback, much like NFL teams do in the regular NFL draft. So I think all of these rankings, Colin, I'm surprised his is so low. I know he's been a little worried about May long term. The one thing I will say about a guy like May, and it applies to Bowers as well, that if you have doubts about a guy that's probably coming out of college the next year, then I get ranking them a little bit lower, because if they don't do it, like Zach, if you really liked Zach Wilson, he obviously kind of blew up his last year, so this wouldn't have been the case. But let's assume that Zach Wilson, was a high profile guy going into his last year, and you took him with the assumption that he was going to be a franchise NFL quarterback. You got that last year of college production, and that's it. You got nothing else from him. So I think if you are worried about a guy like Bowers, is he too small to do it in the NFL? I don't think so, but maybe somebody does. Or if you're worried about May, being boosted by Phil Longo's offense, again, I'm not, and I don't think that's ever been said about anybody ever. Then I think it's fair to rank them a little bit lower, because you're really only getting that 1 year out of them, essentially.
I think we undersell how good Drake May is. Kyler Murray, his only season as a starter at Oklahoma, 4,300 yards passing, just over 1,000 yards rushing. Drake May last year, 4,200 yards passing, just under 700 yards rushing. I don't think that we give him enough credit for being the athlete that he is. I think he had more rushing yards than Caleb Williams, and Caleb Williams is considered to be the dual threat guy.
Drake May actually had just short of 900 if you don't count the sack yards. He had 899 according to PFF. Yeah,
with a horrendous offensive line.
Exactly. Like that's
I was just pulling that up to see.
Yeah, I'm almost positive. I know it's in the 800s. You can double check that. I want to say it's like 899 because Caleb only had 600. Even with the PFF rushing yards, he only had 600 something. I think, and I know Colin's not here to defend him, so I think 50 is criminally low because, again, if you want to play the value game on this, like we talked about earlier in the show, I don't see any way Drake May's not drafted as a top 10 pick next year. So even if you want to go, as you mentioned, Austin, the Zach Wilson route, if you don't think May's it, then when he gets drafted in the top 10, flip him for whatever you want. But 50? Because if he does continue to show us what he did last year, he's going to... I think we've continually talked about how Caleb is probably the only quarterback coming up right now that has a shot to be in like that top 10-ish quarterbacks for Dynasty because of what he can do with his legs, and we overlook what Drake May has done with his legs. I know it's only one season, but if he does it again, like I think you can realistically say he's got a shot to be a dual threat quarterback as well, which then vaults him into that top 10. And to rank him down at 50, like personally, I just don't see that there's 50 players better than him. I just can't see that.
Another thing with Drake May is like, I hate this Phil Longo argument that a lot of people make. I think it's stupid because I think it's such a small sample size, and they single out players who are so have like such a glaring issue and say, "Oh, the NFL doesn't like them." Like De'Ami Brown was not a complete player. Sam Howell, I think there were injury concerns that went underreported. He was also 6 foot. He also got DK Metcalf, AJ Brown drafted. I mean, there were just so many things that Phil Longo has done well. I just think it's a bad argument. Drake May is a 6'4", 230 quarterback who is incredibly mobile, can work out platform. He was a basketball player in high school. His brother was a basketball player at UNC. He has like an incredible athletic bloodline. It's like there are so many things to like about Drake May, and I don't even like the hire that UNC made in Chip Lindsey as their offensive coordinator. I don't think it's a very good one. But there's a lot of reasons to be excited about Drake May, and I just think Colin is the low person on it, but I mean, I'm the high person at 18, so like it's probably somewhere in the middle or close to it. But yeah, I just think there's a lot of reasons to really like Drake May, and a lot of arguments about the offense are... I don't value them very highly.
I want to present this question to the chat only. Who should be ranked higher, Drake May or Dak Prescott? Let me know. Let us know in the chat. Let's move on here to favorite player that you ranked that nobody else did. Austin, I got to start with you because I think it's interesting who you have here.
I think I only have one. So I didn't realize it was Jonte is not the guy that I ranked that nobody else did. Nico Collins is.
You put Cook on the sheet, so.
No, Matthew, we're on favorite player you ranked that nobody else did. It's live, folks. It's a live show. So go ahead and talk to us about Nico Collins, Houston Texans wide receiver Nico Collins. Austin.
Yeah, I took Nico. I put Nico down because, again, he's the only guy that I have ranked that nobody else does. But I think I'm working under the assumption that Houston's about to upgrade their quarterback room in some sort of fashion, and somebody's got to catch passes there next year. They have so many holes. I'm not necessarily sure they're going to go out and get a stud wide receiver in this draft, and free agency obviously is almost done already, and there's nothing of note that happened there. It's going to be Nico or it's going to be Mechie leading that room, and then maybe some guy they take in the third round or something. So at least the last time I checked, I was the only person that had Nico Collins ranked. I actually had to ask to have him added to the player pool because nobody else had him ranked at all. So I don't know if that's still the case, but I think he's a good player. I have him in the 160s or 180s or something like that. You get at least one season of production out of the guy. I don't mind that at all.
He's going to get a huge quarterback upgrade. we like to make fun of ourselves around here. I think it's funny that we're trying to improve the quality of our product whilst still making the same mistakes. Still,
Man,
guaranteed, still making the same mistakes. Chris Moxley, Alabama had trouble identifying a go-to wide receiver last year, and you have an Alabama wide receiver in your C200, a freshman that you must be expecting some big things from, some big development from. Who is that?
Yeah, it's Isaiah Bond who, I believe I was the only person that ranked him, and I just think that he showed enough in high school to make me really excited about what the potential impact of his game is. Like he did a lot of really nice things last year. Like he broke the year 1-0 thresholds that we wanted to see, and as of like a week ago, he was working out with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. Like that's the kind of folks that I want to see Isaiah Bond working out with, because I think he profiles very similarly to them. I have seen speculation on 24/7 and a couple people who are plugged into the Alabama football program that Malik Benson might not be starting over Isaiah Bond. They think Isaiah Bond might beat him for that job. And if that's true, I will certainly be valuing Isaiah Bond as a top 200 player. And so I have him. I have him at the very bottom of my C200, but he made this ranking. And I think that he's an incredibly good player. And he was someone that I really liked coming into last season. So still high on him and still high on that potential. I want players tied to the Alabama offense. I don't think, I think it's a fairly good strategy just in theory, even.
I just wrote his profile for the Devi guide, and I took some not so subtle shots at some of the other members of our group that think that Malik Benson is the hottest thing ever and is just going to step in there and take that job. I don't know what
I really like
either
Benson too,
of these players has ever done to make us think that that's like the assumption we should be making. At worst, you should be thinking they're probably comparable talents, and Bond gets the first crack at it. And I think he's good enough to take advantage of it, which should be like the base level that you feel about the situation.
Do you think either of those? So this would inform my ranking, so I don't think it's a totally off-topic question. But do you think either of Benson or Bond can operate outside to take a Jermaine Burton or Ja'Cory Brooks role? Because I don't know that they can, but I don't know. I think Benson might be able to.
Yeah.
Well, both of these guys' profile is field stretchers, and they're going to have to do that from the outside. I mean, there's not a lot of, unless you're Marvin Mims, we don't have a lot of slot go route runners. So,
I think both these guys will operate in the slot this year, for what it's worth.
Bond played some outside last year, and unfortunately, PFF doesn't break down what targets you got and what alignment. So without me going back and watching every single Alabama game and every single snap of Isaiah Bond to figure out where he was aligned when he was targeted, but I think 20 to 30% of his snaps came out in the perimeter as a true freshman on a team that I think didn't really know what they were doing with the perimeter last year. So I'm willing to withhold judgment on that for right now. And he's certainly an athletic enough guy to do it.
And Chris, I disagree with you that Benson profiles as a slot guy. I mean, you look at the slot wide receivers at Alabama: Slade Bolden, JoJo Earl, Kobe.
I mean, this year, do you think that he's going to?
I just don't know.
Yeah. No, I was mostly speaking to this year. Like, is he going to take Ja'Cory Brooks or Jermaine Burton's role outside? I find that
he could take Jermaine Burton's role. I do not think that he takes Ja'Cory Brooks.
I think
Ja'Cory Brooks as a top 10.
I think Isaiah Bond could too, but. That's kind of the player that we're talking about. They're like not that different in terms of the way that Alabama's going to utilize them.
No, they're fighting for this.
It would not be a Campus to Canton show unless we took some time to call each other out. So, I mean, we're going to get into this. That's at least worth dropping a like on the video, subscribing to the channel. Austin, should I start with you or should I go to Chris first to call someone out?
Go with what you feel. I have an answer. So
okay, all right. Let's start taking shots out here. Austin, call someone out on their C200 rankings.
Yeah, Chris, for somebody who is so I had to go with Chris. It's not tight end related either. It's actually a very weird one because you are generally very aggressive ranking the freshman. You even said that yourself earlier in the show, but I think you have all of the freshman wide receivers, top tier guys, ranked way too low. For instance, you have Jonte Cook at 145, Brandon Innis at 144. You have Zach Branch at 113. And I think all those guys are more valuable than some guys you have ahead of them. Like I would take you have Dalton Schultz at 125. Now, granted, that situation has already changed probably since you did this because he just signed that 1-year deal with Houston. But I don't know how you could want him over any of those guys. A couple of other players in there as well. Like Devin Achane, I wouldn't take him over any of those receivers. I think there's a lot of uncertainty there. A guy like Keenan Allen, who's at the end of his career, probably Rashee Rice. You just have some odd guys in front of some of them where I think that's philosophically for you odd.
I don't necessarily disagree. And there are players that I think after this exercise I will be moving up. One of them is Jonte Cook. I think that he probably deserves to be closer to like the 110 to 90 range. I do have questions about the rest of the wide receivers. Wide receivers is a really tough position for me to evaluate and rank based on incoming freshmen. So like I'm far more aggressive when we talk about we talk about quarterbacks. But I think you're probably right. I do need to move some of them up. So I will own this one as I need to be true to my philosophical opinion. But freshman wide receivers are incredibly difficult for me before they step on the field. So while it's in line philosophically, it also like that's the one. Like I'm higher on freshman tight ends than I am freshman wide receivers, which is probably a bad position to be on. But you're probably right.
Do you have a freshman tight end ranked? Do you have Deuce Robinson ranked? Is that?
I had to move him because I had him actually pretty high, but I had to move him because I think he might play baseball.
Such a reasonable and respectful conversation. Get out of here, Chris and Austin. Let's go to somebody who's actually going to. Well, I mean, Matt, do we want to? Can we come to you next? I mean, I don't want to go in the order of the show sheet. I feel like you're going to call me out so we can get some energy here. I don't know that that's the case, but let's get some energy in this room. Chris and Austin just having a respectful.
We just shook hands.
Here.
Yeah, we get
too much.
A hug at the end. We called it a day. Yeah.
So I really only had to call out Alfred and Colin, but I don't want to do that because they're not here to defend themselves.
Do it.
I just. Like, Colin, I love you, buddy, but Drake May, I think, falls in this bucket for him where he's openly stated takes longer to rank certain QBs higher because he wants to see more of them. Dude, you got to take the leap when someone shows you something. Like, you can't sit there. I get being hesitant on Quinn Ewers. He has Quinn Ewers not much farther behind Drake May. Drake May has shown – I love Quinn. Quinn is my guy. Drake May has shown us 1,000 times more than Quinn Ewers has, and you only have a ranked 15 spots behind each other? Come on, dude. No. You have got to rank these guys higher. Alfred's are just all over the place. But I don't want to say anything about that because I just know he values players so much differently than we do. Or I shouldn't say we, a lot of us. It's funny because just using the recruiting rankings as an example, I think I actually ranked closer to him than anybody else, which hurt my heart a little bit. But I get it together, both of you. It's embarrassing. I think that's who exactly wanted to call out in our Discord when they're like, can we find out who's sortable so I can check off certain rankers? It's both of you. Get it together.
Ooh, wow.
Colin got engaged quicker than he's willing to move quarterbacks up.
Exactly.
I don't understand.
Matthew just going out there. You know what? Let's just pile on. Alfred has, I think the problem that I have is DJ Moore at 93. DJ Moore is 26 years old. He can be an extension of the running game. He's one of the more athletic wide receivers we've seen in the last, however many years. I think that he's just a really solid player. And I'm still drafting DJ Moore relatively highly. In dynasty startup drafts, even I don't do dynasty startup drafts anymore, but I would draft DJ Moore relatively highly given his age, and he just got a tremendous upgrade in quarterback in Justin Fields. So I really like his landing spot. I think he's going to be the focal point. 93 is just really too low. I would bet that there's a big
He actually has Dante Moore at
variation.
93. He has DJ Moore at 104. So actually even lower than you.
That's even worse.
I look at the wrong Moore. He has Dante. I think I have Dante Moore in the 50s or so.
You and Chris have him both top 50. And
Yeah.
Dante Moore. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
everybody
do.
else
Yeah,
has
that
him. I think Austin, Colin, and myself have Dante Moore in the 70s, 60s. Like, we're right within like a 10-player range of each other. And then, then there's Alfred in the hundreds with or 90, whatever, with Dante Moore. Yeah.
We really
that's
love
a whole
Dante
nother
Moore.
Dante Moore is my highest rated freshman. I think he's my quarterback, like 6 overall. Yes, we do really. Detroit King, stand up. All right, who hasn't called? Has everyone called someone out? That was way too respectful.
Chris didn't call anybody out.
Chris, let's go, Chris. Let's call somebody. Oh, he's gonna.
Never mind.
Okay.
Next segment.
Oh, good.
So
All right.
at the time of writing this in, Felix had not ranked Malachi Nelson. And I took exception to that. And I said, ... why is Felix not ranking Malachi Nelson? That felt awkward. And then he did rank Malachi Nelson. 152nd. 152nd for our 60th overall player. He is the low man because 70th is the second lowest. So a player that Felix has QB6 in his C2C rankings is now 152nd. Dante Moore, who he has 53rd, is QB4. So what exactly is the difference between these two players? I don't know. And then, this, since he ranked Malachi Nelson, 152nd, which is barely doing him any service, I understand. I felt like I had to add a little bit more to this argument because, I want to be fair and, I didn't want to just call him out for not ranking the player. So let's talk about Connor Wegman, who is our 79th overall player. He goes unranked as well, despite being the lowest rank currently is 101st and his average rank is 84th. Ty Simpson is the same. He is the 107th overall player, average 106th, and he is simply absent in these rankings. Ty Simpson is a player that Felix actually likes too. Compared him to Johnny Manziel, but in a good way. 5-star quarterback who could be the starter at Alabama. Nico Iamaleava, 5-star quarterback at Tennessee. Jackson Arnold, a 5-star quarterback at Oklahoma. 2 5-stars in 2023 class go entirely unranked. And here's some players who are ranked, though. Hunter Renfrow, who is wide receiver 3 on an Oakland Raiders team led by Jimmy Garoppolo, is 96th. Nobody else has him ranked except Matt, who has him at 180. Jarvis Landry is 150, so Felix would not trade Jarvis Landry for Malachi Nelson. Michael Penix is above all of these players at 137. So Michael Penix would not be traded for any of these true freshmen. Noah Fant is 180, which means that Felix would not trade Noah Fant for Ty Simpson, Connor Wegman, Nico Iamaleava, or Jackson Arnold. And then Evan Hull, who is slow, small, and from Northwestern, is 187. So you will not be trading Jackson Arnold, Nico Iamaleava, Connor Wegman, Ty Simpson for Evan Hull if you are in Felix's position. Please do not even consider offering those trades to him.
Okay. First things first. When you're completing these rankings, I actually did this, from the top of my head. But when it comes to ranking the freshmen, I had the player that I had the most faith in, the freshman quarterbacks, Dante Moore is ranked the highest. There's a lot that could happen between now and when let's start with Malachi Nelson. Malachi Nelson and Arch Manning are going to potentially start. And I know that I was using the same logical process for both of these players because I have Arch Manning ranked just a few spots ahead of Malachi Nelson. Let's not forget, Malachi Nelson could potentially be competing with Dylan Raiola next season. So if this is a faith-based process, there's the chance that he's going to be in spring camp battling it out with just as talented of a player next year. So there's really no guarantee, which is why he's my third ranked. One of the reasons why he's my third ranked quarterback. I just think that Dante Moore is a better, and I think Arch Manning is better and has more, dual threat ability. So that is what. Listen, it's fair. You know what? Fair. It's a difficult exercise to do. I'm going to go through of my rankings and see who I have ranked that you guys don't have ranked. And you know what, Chris Moxley, just for you, I'm going to make some adjustments. Is that fair? That was a very thorough butt whooping you just gave me. I'm embarrassed.
And I even had to adjust based on your changes that you made before the show.
Do we want to blow up his entire online persona too? He's second lowest on Anthony Richardson out of everybody.
I'm second lowest on Anthony Richardson.
So I saw that in our chat for the show, but I did not want to be the one to say it. That is excellent.
I'm also curious. Where's your boy Zach Wilson over your quote unquote busting field? So I see if I'm looking at the screen correctly, it's number 15 overall. Did Zach? I
think
Wilson
Fields is also the highest on busted
200?
Of anyone, by the way.
Is he? He's the highest on busted. Who made the top 15? Interesting.
All right.
Yeah, he is. Dang.
Let's you know what? We like to have fun around here. We like to poke and prod. We like to make fun of each other.
This is the I'm not mad, don't call me mad online meme, by
the way. Let's close out here. Let's close out here with some favorites. And I will, Matthew, let me start. Favorite players to rank. And to me, it's the duo of Drew Aller and Nick Singleton. I think that both of these players are going to be the reason why Penn State is potentially competing for a playoff spot this year. I really can't understate how Nick Singleton is my number one ranked running back. I have him ahead of Travion Henderson. I think that he's a potential Jonathan Taylor type at the running back position. We don't know that he can catch. I like the fact that he's splitting the backfield with Katron Allen, because Katron Allen could potentially keep him fresh. But this is a dynamic player who I think you can build an NFL offense around, somebody who can get you, 1,500 yards and double-digit touchdowns. And I've never seen a high school quarterback make anticipatory throws like Drew Aller, throwing the ball before the wide receiver breaks in the middle of a defense with 3-4 defenders around. I just haven't seen it. And if you watch Drew Aller play against Purdue last year in a couple of drives that he got, he made those same types of throws in that game. I think that after this season is over, Drew Aller will be widely considered to be one of the best quarterbacks in college football and one of the best quarterback prospects that we've seen in some times. And this is not like a hot take. I mean, this is a guy who was the number one ranked quarterback in the 2022 class last year. For most sites, I think he was the number one ranked quarterback. So I'm not giving a hot take here, but I just think that Drew Aller is that good, can make any throw on the field. So I have a whole lot of faith in him. I wish I had more exposure to him in my Campus to Canton leagues, but quite frankly, this market is really, really smart because he went highly in freshman drafts last year and he'd be really hard to trade for. So I'm not saying anything that I'm not saying anything novel here. Nothing novel, but my favorite players to rank here were Drew Aller and Nick Singleton. I have a ton of faith in these two. I think they're going to be right there, both of them, as offensive skill position players at the top of the 2025 NFL draft. Those are my favorites. Let's go here, Chris. Let's go to Moxley. Your favorite players or
Mox
player?
Did his. It was Isaiah Bond.
Oh, it was Isaiah.
Yeah.
Okay, Austin.
Yeah, my favorite was Jonte Cook. Bring up the graphic now, and I'm only second highest on him. Again, Alfred is just so far ahead of everybody that I don't understand what's happening here. I just think Jonte is legit, man. And I thought he was really, really good. And now they're saying that he's basically been the best wide receiver at Texas so far this spring in a wide receiver room that's certainly not lacking for talent. by any stretch of the imagination. He's got pretty good size, right around 6 feet. They've got him weighed in at 180, 185 pounds, which is awesome for him. I don't even think he needs to get any bigger than that. I think he has the personality of a star wide receiver, which I think is critical for a lot of these guys. Borderline cocky. You cannot destroy his confidence. You cannot destroy his will. We saw him going on his college tours and making fun of schools because they didn't have enough football championship trophies in the trophy case, like live on Instagram or TikTok or wherever else he was. So I just think this guy is fantastic. I think he plays a lot more than people think he's going to this year. And I wouldn't be shocked if after this year, we're talking about him as the wide receiver 1 in all of college football after Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka leave. He's that talented.
Is that it? Is that everyone? Matthews, have you given yours?
Yeah, I'll give you mine.
Do I want you to do
you
yours?
Don't. One of them is Ewers, and I'm not going to talk much about him because we already kind of talked a lot about him, but I do think, again, based on the conversation we had earlier, there is a real shot that he's going to be ranked higher just because of the offense and the weapons around him. Austin just talked about Jonte Cook, who's looked phenomenal. I mean, if Xavier Worthy shows us something close to what he did his freshman season, Jatavian Sanders shows us again what he did last year, I think that running back room is going to be just fine with as good as apparently Jadon Blue has looked when Jonathan Brooks comes back. And they have, as Chris Moxley has talked a lot about on Devy Debate, because I know he stands with me on the Ewers bandwagon here, is you have an offensive line that's bringing all but one player back, and all these guys are high-end 4 or 5 stars, second year in this offense. I think this is going to be a great year for Quinn Ewers, regardless of, yes, last year was bad, but I think he bounces back in a major way. The other one is going to come as no surprise to anybody. It's got to be my guy, Kyle McCord. I've got to do it. I think he's going to have an amazing season with the Ohio State Buckeyes. He's got the talent around him. I am a little worried about that offensive line because it does look a little scary at the moment, but Travion Henderson, Mayan Williams, Dallin Hayden in the running backs, Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka, Xavier Johnson, Julian Fleming, Brandon Ennis, Noah Rogers, he's going to have all the talent in the world around him, and Ryan Day there helping call plays. I know Brian Hartline's going to be the offensive coordinator, but it's still Ryan Day's offense. And you look at that schedule, there is not one team but Michigan that you have to worry about. He's going to put up points. We've seen it happen in the past. If he can have anything close to that Dwayne Haskins type season, because of the kind of lack of depth at the quarterback position behind Caleb Williams and Drake May, I think there's a realistic shot that he gets first-round draft capital. And I know we talked a little bit about it in the Discord. A lot of people were surprised to see him that high, and they brought it up in our Slack channel. There was someone who I was the highest on him. Surprise, surprise. There was one person who was only 5 ranking spots behind me that helped buoy him up into our top 100. So take that for what it's worth. And it's the guy sitting right below me, who's also very high on one Kyle McCord.
Am I the second highest at Kyle McCord?
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
Look, I actually really like Kyle McCord, and I also like Drake. I also like Quinn Ewers because his advanced stats look really, really good. So A+.
Drop a like on this video if you're watching it live. If you are watching the replay later on, subscribe to the channel, drop a like. We're going to continue bringing you content like this as we attempt to grow this format and popularize college fantasy sports. We can't tell you how much we appreciate the support that you all have given to the website, to the podcast feed, to everything that it is that we do around here. We hope that you will continue to support us. All right. Have a good night.